I was in Stalag Luft 1, which was at Barth, Germany. Barth is on the Baltic Sea, just a short way from Sweden. There were over 9,000 of us there, most of us Americans. It started out, I'm sure, as a British camp, and we had 4 compounds in the camp. That's 4 separate fenced-off areas. So when we got there, we were all assembled, just standing, and what I think was a mess hall, and I don't know why I called it a mess hall because it's never used. But this German officer, he spoke in German. Anybody sprechen Sie Deutsch? So a guy that was to be one of my roommates, I think it was, Rockenhaus, I think he said he spoke German. So then the German officer speaks very good English and says, tell the men they can smoke and throw their butts in here, which was a kind of a coffee can. And I'm sure that was a big joke for him. He probably did it with every group that came in.
Of course, they searched us as we went in. If we had any food, which we were told it was a 3-day trip, so we ate the food knowing that when you are searched, the Germans are going to take what food you have left. They'll take all your cigarettes, things like that. We were allowed to go in and take a shower, in which we really needed it. We had our shoes, we had to take them off. I took my shower with all my clothes on because I had to wash that stuff off me. And then after I got that cleaned in, I took my clothes off and took a shower and put those wet clothes on. Now this is in the middle of February and it's cold. Then we were assigned to a barracks, and half of my barracks were British officers and the other half was American enlisted men.
What was your impression of Stalag 4 when you got there?
Well, I figured that was going to be my home for the rest of the war. The first evening there was one of acquaintance meeting people, and this is going to seem funny to you, but the first night I was there was a bed. Well, we slept on wooden beds, you know, with straw mattress, and there was a bed that looked like it had a body in it. And I said, what's that? He said, well, that's one of the guys that died. They were kidding me, you know. And I went along with the joke, you know, and finally the guy did uncover himself, and they welcomed me in.
We had a straw mattress, Excelsior mattress. It's like straw, and 4 slats of wood, 4 wood slats. So there's no springs, just some of the straw, and we had 1 blanket.
They had us all in a room, and bunks with. We had straw mattresses, and I think 1 or 2 blankets, and it got so cold we'd sleep together to keep warm at night because it was cold, and it very little fuel what they give you. They give you a few bricks to keep a fire going now and then. With the big old rooms, it was just cold.
We used 1 bar of soap for everything. At the end, they were brushing your teeth with it too. Never had a shower. We didn't have a shower there.
How did you clean yourself then?
We just cleaned ourselves the best we could. They had given us flea powder, and this being a brand new camp, we kept fairly clean. Had 1 basin, we did everything. We shaved maybe once a week, kept our hair almost baldy, you know, for head lice and stuff like that. And we would get the German papers. That was our toilet paper. The room captain would cut that up, had the sheets, put them in here, you know what I mean? That was the only toilet paper I had.
And 24 of us lived in 1 room that measured 16 feet by 24 feet. We had our military organization, and the ranking guy in each building, each barracks building, was a squadron commander. Each room would have a room commander, and our room commander wanted to exercise some authority in our room. Pick your clothes up or whatever. And so the guys all got together and decided somebody needed to have a talk with him, and of course I was elected to do that. And it all worked out very well. I told him, this is our home. These guys need a place to relax.
I call it dehydrated grass soup.
Spam was the Stalag steak, we used to call it.
And then they had a cabbage soup we call Green Death.
Our food was very, very meager. The Red Cross food parcels, which were intended to be something extra for us, were our main source of nutrition. We were supposed to get 1 parcel per week per man. When we arrived, we got first 1 to I think 4. The next week we got 1 to 12, and then we got no more for 6 weeks. We almost starved. We had 2 thin pieces of bread equal to about 1 slice of bread with ersatz coffee, that's imitation coffee, no calories, for breakfast. They came around with a tub of soup, and we got equivalent of about 1.5 cups of soup made from dehydrated vegetables at noon. At night, 2 more pieces of bread and another cup of ersatz coffee. We refer to that still as the famine.
Once we're in camp, they had other POWs that did the cooking and brought the food, and they brought it big old wooden tubs with the slats, stuck up a couple inches higher on each side, pipe through, 2 guys on their shoulders bringing our soup, and that's how the potatoes came too. And we had at the barracks, and they had a little tin can, and we every first thing you yell is stir it up, 'cause if for soup it might have something in there. If they stirred it up, if they didn't, you just got water. But they'd give you a can full of soup.
You got bread, German bread, if the English hadn't bombed Stettin, because every time they would bomb Stettin, the Germans would say they hit the bread factory so you don't get no bread. That was the excuse they used not to give us any bread.
Was there somehow you could scrounge for food in some way?
The only thing we could scrounge for food is they had a potato peel pile there, and us guys would go out there and get gobs of potato peel, put them on top of our little stove, wash them first, put them on top of our stove, and we had potato soup. It tasted like potato soup, and it came out of the potato peels.
We'd get a can or 2 once in a while from the Red Cross, but they didn't throw them cans away. They'd flatten them out, and they'd crease them and bend them, and then they'd put a piece and they'd run it along there, and they'd make a pan out of it, a real good baking pan. You wouldn't believe that they could make a pan like that, but they did. And we'd get issued couple slices of bread a day, and we'd get some Red Cross sugar and powdered milk and a few other things, and we'd pool it and mix it up in a batter and put it in one of them pans and bake it and have a cake.
Tex Conway was a character from Texas, a piece of a guy. He got the job of slicing the bread in 28 identical slices. with the end slices, we took turns eating the 2 end slices, but he used to chop 28 slices and we got 2 apiece daily. That was our food every day, 2 slices of bread. We had a mess hall where we'd go there in the morning and have barley. Barley is just like oatmeal, but it had all these little things crawling around on the inside. All these little white things, you know. But the first time I saw it, I tried to move the white things. But after a while, you close your eyes, and then that was part of your food.
What did you do day in and day out?
Oh man, we learned how to play cards. Some of the cards got kind of beat up, you know. But we had cards and we play cards, and we did a lot of walking. And we had a guardrail that's like 20 feet in from the main fence, and we had a path. We'd round and round. You'd go talk and start rumors, things like that. You know, you got to pay for the airplane you just wrecked, and you're going to be court-martialed for not getting it back. That kind, you know, all kinds of rumors going around.
They had established a kind of a library that we could go and get a very limited amount of books, and so we did that. And I also wrote my diary, but I couldn't write it because they were very clever about taking away everything that they saw you write. So I'd had to do it when the jurors weren't around. And I couldn't do it on regular paper because they'd find it. And so I did it on cigarette wrappings. A package of cigarettes, take the wrapping off and do it on the inside of the package. Then I would stick it in my shoe, and I didn't get caught.
We did have available a lot of stuff from the Red Cross. We had like a baseball and a football. In other words, things you could play with, and also books. I read a lot of them that because we really had nothing to do.
Did they offer classes or anything? Guys ever share their knowledge or anything like that?
No, we did have a band. We had a band made up of Kriegies, you know. We'd have plays. All the Kriegies would dress up as women, and we'd have little plays, little entertainment. Yeah, we did have that. Well, we used to play a lot of poker, and we had no money, so it's IOU. And a few of the guys we used to pile up. I ended up I think sending $10 when I got out that I owed, and another guy sent me $5 he owed, stuff like that.
What was the relationship like with the guards?
We call them goons, and goons up. But we were told to leave the guards alone, that if we seen anybody with the guards, to just leave them alone, because usually 2 guys would be assigned to a certain guard when he came in the gate, and they would find this guy and they would be his friend, and they'd buddy up to him and get anything they could from him, a button or anything, whatever. That was their job. Well, nobody was supposed to bother these situations, and it worked.
They told us don't go out the windows, which we're only going outside, you know, easier than going down through the corridor. So here's this guy in the next barrack. He had a bunch of laundry he had done. We just lay it on the grass, and they put a bullet in his back. They killed him right there. That was horrible. Then we put him on a little table.
I don't understand. Why did they shoot him?
Because they told us don't step out the windows. But going out the windows was nothing. It was if we were in our room, they call us out for a roll call, which they did many, many times a day. They call us, you blow the whistle, so we just step out the window. Barracks were up on small stilts. That's why you could not escape there from it all. And we didn't pay much attention to him. It could have been any one of us. Had an ugly guard there named Big Stoop.
We called Big Stoop.
There was one guard they called Big Stoop.
They called him Big Stoop. He was about 6'5", probably weighed 250 pounds, and he was the enforcer. You didn't dare look at him cross-eyed. He wouldn't think nothing of slamming you in the side of the head. I nicknamed him Ham Hands. His hands were huge. And he has been known to hit a person on the side of the head and even break an eardrum, hit him that hard.
You remember Terry and the Pirates comic strip years ago? Terry had this, I think it was a Mongolian called Big Stoop. He was like his right-hand man. Well, this German guard looked like that. And he was mean. When I was going into Stalag 4, someone slipped me a little compass about as big around as my thumbnail. And it was one you could hide in your rear end. But I wasn't about to do that, so I had it under my tongue. And we were allowed to take a shower when we was going into that camp. And we come out, and while we were taking showers, the other guards were going through all of our suitcases and everything, taking all of our cigarettes and anything we had left. And we were told to dress, so I put my underclothes on, my socks and pants, and stepped into my shoes. And I turned. We was in this long building with the tables lined up in the center where our stuff was at, and the benches were along the sides. So I turned, put my right foot up on the bench, and was bent over tying my shoe. And I knew this German was hollering something at us, a rush or I don't know. And so I quickly put my foot down and put my left foot up, and just as I did that, he come down over my back with a leather belt. And I jumped up, and that compass flew out of my mouth. And he saw that, and he went and picked it up, and then he turned and hit me 2 more times over the back.
One thing that happened there, the British, I admire them very much. They tried to make life miserable for those German guards. They counted us twice a day. The colonel we had in charge ended up as a ground force colonel over everybody. Had us stand at attention and dress right dress so they could walk long, count us in rows. So counting us twice a day didn't take long at all. We'd be dismissed and back in the barracks. The British milled around like a bunch of cattle, made the Germans shove them into lines to try to count. There were always somebody short. They'd be hiding in any place, maybe even in a latrine. In barracks they weren't supposed to be in it, just any place to disrupt the Germans. Every day, twice a day.
Our guard was a little guy, probably in his late 40s, early 50s. We called him Vasislos. We had a guard watch for Vasislos, and he'd come in, he'd put his hands behind him and walk around, just looking around.
Did that translate if that was German? What did it mean?
Vasislos, I would say, what's cooking? What's happening? What's going on? Vasislos.
We knew a guard that lived and had a meat market in Detroit before the war. And he went back to get his parents, and when he got back there, one of them was very ill, and they waited, and then that parent died. And then the other parent, he's got as far as Bremerhaven to come back, and the Germans wouldn't let him out of Germany. He was well into his 60s, and he'd come in and spend an hour or two talking to us in the room there, and very nice. And some of the other guards we could trade with him. We had a sergeant by the name of McKnight. No, just Knight. Now he's read and spoke German. So he had a guard bring us the daily newspapers in. There was often they printed a paper, and he would read the news to us. And we were losing the war every day, just going down. In fact, one day it was in there that the Germans had invaded New York. And of course, we had built radio, or not me, but somebody, and we was listening to. They were listening to BBC News all the time. We really knew more about what was going on, and we'd tell those Germans, and he believed us. He knew that they were losing the war.
We got the news through the British were very sharp on that. They made a crystal radio, and this was broken apart so that, and that's what the Germans were searching for a lot of times, the radio. We would get the news from the BBC, and it would be passed around, you know.
We didn't know where the radio was. It was hidden back there someplace in one of the rooms, and
how was the information disseminated?
Well, they put out a paper. We put out the powwow news every week, and it because they could get the BBC news, and they'd get it, and then they had also made a mimeograph, and they would make just one paper for each building. So we had to read it and then pass it on to the next room until all the rooms had done it, and then they'd burn it up. But and if the juries came in while we were doing it, we were to get rid of it even if we had to eat it.
Some of the older guys had built a radio, and the way they did that in the early days, they could trade cigarettes that came in the Red Cross parcels to guards, certain guards, to bring things in. And we got a printed copy of news every day. In our room, we had a piece of cloth, not quite 3 feet square, maybe 2 feet square. I don't know where the cloth came from, but we all got around the table, and one guy did the drawing, and we drew a map of Europe. And we had a piece of thread, and we would move the lines. There were certain guards that would come to our room to check the progress of the war, because we had information that he didn't have.
Ever any discussion about escape?
Well, that's another thing. Several people tried it, but you had to get permission. You had to go up and get permission from the, your powers that be, and they want to know what kind of a plan, what were you going to try to do, and then, and only one at a time, see? In other words, they didn't want a lot of them. You had to ask permission, and they would give you the time to. And several tunnels were tried, but the Germans would never. They had dogs and everything that would go under the house and smell around, the police dogs, And I think they would let us pass the time because nobody ever got out. Because they would wait until you were getting close to the fence or whatever, and then they would cave it in and they'd close it up. They would let you play if you wanted, but that was a terrible thing to have to try, and you had to get permission to stop because they didn't want, if somebody had a good idea, they were hoping. And a couple of guys did get out by hiding in the trucks to bring supplies. Very few of them. But they always ended up back. They put them in solitary when they came back, and then.
Escape at one time was an option for a lot of the guys, but until the Germans came across with a big notice saying, escape is no longer a sport. You'll be shot on sight. So that sort of kept the guys from trying to escape.
Was there ever...
I never tried to escape. I figured this was it. I'd have to wait out the war.
We were told by our commander, our officer, Hubert Zemke, that the time for escaping is past. And they had tried to escape. In fact, there were 7 people that that dug a tunnel and got out. But 4 of them were killed, and 3 of them were captured later. So, you know, it wasn't a very, very good thing to do. And Colonel Zemke was quite plain about that to us, that don't try to dig your way out. And
just knowing that the war was winding down.
Yeah, it's not going to be long.
You could hear the tanks, you could hear the jeeps and all this stuff, and the guns going all over the place, and it was dangerous being out there, and they didn't want you running around, but a lot of us sneaking around. There's always a couple hundred guys running around doing something, you know. And the tanks came out over, and the barbed wire fences were really pretty thick, and they just came and rolled right over the top of them and stopped the tanks, and on the back of the tanks they'd had K rations. They were carrying to the prison camp. And they dumped them off. And they yelled out, "You are free." And then I would say within 4 or 5 hours they had a soup kitchen going on in there. They had showers, like 20 showers lined up for guys who could start taking showers. And they had medical doctors there. They had all kinds of stuff. And so finally, when we had to go back into the tents and stay there, or whatever it was. Americans made us do this. And we're sitting there, and we're laying, you're not allowed to stand up. And Patton comes in with 2 aides, you know, like this, and he walks right all the way in there and puts his hands on there, and his pistols hanging out there and all that stuff. He says, "Everything all right in here?" You know how, "Everything all right here?" And turned around and walked out. I mean, that was really, and they just cheered like hell, you know. But the other 2 aides went over there, and they went over there, and they picked out these guys, and they were Germans, you know, spies or something, or whatever. They were posing as Americans. So we thought that was unusual. We never knew what happened to them.
We felt that the jurors knew that they were in bad shape and that the Russians were just about on top of them. And so we kind of expected that they would be leaving, and we didn't know really what was going on. But one morning we woke up and the juries were all gone. Nobody in the towers, nobody calling anybody out for anything. So we knew that they had taken off, so we knew that the Russians were quite close. And that same day, we saw them coming over the hill, the Russians. And they didn't know we were here. They didn't know what this was at first. And some stupid kid, excuse me for calling soldiers stupid kids, but these guys had gone out of the gate, and actually the colonel had said, "Now stay where you are. Don't go out," because he knew the Russians were coming. But some of these guys went out and explored. They found a warehouse full of German uniforms. They put the German uniforms on and came back to show everybody off. They didn't get back because just as they were coming back, the Russians came over the hill. And boy, they got them. So when we found that out, we were very careful about not going out. And Eisenhower sent the word, "Stay where you are, we will come get you." And so he sent B-17s after us. And we did get out, and they started taking them out by the ones that had been there the longest. And of course, we were the last ones to get out, and they took us all over to Camp Lucky Strike in France.
We heard that the Russians were coming, and they did. They came in early in the wee hours of the morning. They tore down the barbed wire fences and the towers.
Did Zemke give any orders or organize anything for when the Russians arrived?
He told us that we should stay put. not to do anything to try to leave or just stay put and see what's going to happen. Some of the guys left. They figured they could march to the Allied lines to the west.
What happened after that?
Well, the Russians brought in food for us. Cattle on the hoof, you know, pigs, cattle, rabbits. They brought in. They had their women with them, the Cossacks, and the women riding their horses right alongside them. And they brought in a lot of vodka, which was bad, because the guys took the vodka and they became deathly sick drinking the vodka after not having any substantial food. And some of the guys were butchers and some of the guys were farmers. They broke up the herd of cattle and kept some out for milking and some out for beef. And they did slaughter some of the cattle and pass steaks around to the barracks. Even though it had hair in it, it was pretty good.
All Saturday night, artillery had gone overhead. So Sunday, they said there was going to be a mass for Catholics. So we went over, there was a little French priest. He just started a mass, and some American sergeant came over and says to us, "Get back to your area where you were." I had no tent or anything, and lay low. So then, gunfire, this and that, and all of a sudden we see the guards coming out of the tower, and the Americans were there. And this was quite a sight, to see the SWATs that come down and the American flag go up. Beautiful. Chills up and down your back, really. And they were tossing food over to us, you know, D-bars, stuff that we, before the prisoner war, you know, you wouldn't want to touch. This was delicacies now. The GIs were great. So we asked them, I remember us saying, we hadn't heard from home, letters, had no idea what's going on. So I remember somebody asking, "What's #1 on the hit parade?" And it was, "Don't fence me in."